Taylor, you froze for a second. I don't see it live yet.
Yeah, it still says preparing, so.
There it goes. All right, you want to give me post status back?
Yep.
Councilman Flynn, good to see you, or your picture.
Thank you. You don't want to see my picture, believe me.
Sure I do. We're dressing up for this, apparently.
That's my
Oh,
picture.
you are pretty backlit, aren't
Yes.
you?
So I could close that, but I didn't shower today. My hair looks awful. I was just out in the park talking to a parks worker in my neighborhood, and so I'm kind of sweaty. And I'm gonna have my late lunch now, so I don't want to have people see me eating.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, we would suggest that you grab a hat.
That's right. All
And
right.
why
so,
is that?
co-host, so you can share your screen when if the time comes.
Okay.
Whole bunch of them here.
Hey, Kathy. Hey, Jennifer. You're on. Yeah, you need to get a hat. You're on mute, though.
Be right back.
Look the way you started. So I got this hat because our elementary school was supposed to do a 1920s fundraiser.
Oh.
So I have suspenders, the whole, whole thing, and it got canceled. It was in March,
Well,
March. Yeah.
I mean, so Mike kind of had this idea, right? And then my mom, there was a costume shop that was going out of business. And so my mom went, and they pretty much like, you could just get whatever you wanted and you told the woman how much you wanted to pay for it. And so my children they're still in the dress up phase. And so she brought home like all of these hats. And so I was trying to think about this meeting, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to change hats throughout the meeting and like see what happens.
I love that. In fact, if you hear about a costume shop, just let me know.
Okay.
Look at that, Jennifer. Love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a Venetian gondolier.
I love it. Thomas, Naomi, are you guys wearing hats?
Kathy.
Hi there. I should introduce myself. So I'm Naomi Grunditz. I am an aide for Councilwoman Sandoval. And this is my first time attending this meeting. We apologize. Our office has been not involved so far, but going forward, I'm going to be attending these in the point of contact. And I missed the memo on hats, but I fully support it. And I'm going to go grab one right now.
Nice. Nice job,
Kathy.
Kathy. Nice job, Thomas.
Kathy, good job.
I missed the memo on hats too. I just,
There wasn't a memo. We're just all copying Marisol.
It was
Thomas, that's a great hat.
a last minute thing. Yep, you do, Eugene. Go get one.
Yeah, Sam.
Councilwoman Sawyer.
Come on, Sam. Nice.
Oh my
Nice.
goodness.
I need a hat too.
Where are we-
Now I'm so jealous. I'm gonna go find one. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Come on, Sam. You can do it.
What am I doing?
Get a hat.
Oh, hat. Hat.
I don't know
I
if you
got
noticed
the hat.
the trend here.
Or
Yeah.
you have to shave your head.
I like that. Good.
I went pretty close. I got the number 2. I don't know. It's other than Bicken. What else?
Number 2.
Eugene, I hope you're getting a hat.
Eugene's technology's been iffy today, including his mic, so he might have to use the chat here. But he says he's getting one, so good.
Okay.
We need hats. I missed the memo.
We're just all we're seeing how the dominoes work when Marisol does something. We all copy it. Look at that, Councilwoman Sawyer.
What's really sad is that I didn't have to go that far to find it.
Wait, I missed the memo about hats.
It's okay, just go get one now.
Okay, I'm going to.
Yeah. Hey, it's hat day, everybody. Go get a hat.
And if we weren't all home, we wouldn't be able to do
back.
Go get a hat.
I love it, Pete.
There we go. Sam, that is a 10-gallon hat there. Wow. It's impressively big. Nice, Pete. Come on, Tyler, you can get a hat. You know it. We'll be right back.
I think John's getting one. Jasmine doesn't seem to be moving. Her bun is good enough.
Jasmine, I'm just wearing a scarf, so whatever hair covering.
I guess I could look around, but
oh, look at that, John. That's a hat. Let's get some infrastructure built.
Nice.
I want a picture of all this.
Okay. All right.
Kelly's
Let's see.
rocking it with a hat.
Hair
Alana
rolls off here, huh?
got quite the wide brim hat. Look at that.
Look at that.
Elizabeth, Brandon.
Rhiannon's about to go play some tennis.
Wow.
You know those studies like the elevator, someone stands facing the opposite direction and everybody just starts doing it? We no longer even have to say anything. People look and they're like, oh, hat! And go get one.
Come on, Amber.
Woo! Yeah.
You got a hat, Amber? Nice job, Kelly. We've decided it's hat day, everybody. Go grab a hat.
Get a hat.
I'm sorry, guys. It's my birthday, and I'm out for my birthday lunch with mom and grandma. No time to get a hat. I'm in the car. Sorry. Here's my hat.
There you go. No worries.
Looks good. Looks
Hey, that works.
Okay. Oh, did I just see a graduation cap?
Oh, I love it.
Nice
Jasmine,
job,
that's
Kelly. Nice, Jasmine.
Grandma came through.
All right, so what do you think, Marisol?
I think we should start some good news or something here for those of you who are here.
It's hat day.
It's hat day.
Look at that, Jasmine. Wow.
All right.
Wait, I have to talk a little bit about this. This is a Peruvian soccer team. It says now or never. So I think that should be the motto for us too.
Oh, that's a good
now
one.
or never, guys.
That is awesome. Okay, I'm going to get started. So welcome everyone. Meeting number 12. We decided to change it up a little bit at the last moment and wear some hats. I might change mine a couple times throughout today. I got this one too, just in case. I'm going to do it that way. So we're trying to keep it fun, guys. We know this has been a heck of a trip for all of us. So let's do some roll call here. If you would like to give some good news, Patty also had the suggestion, if you'd like to say something you're grateful for. I know some of us are closing out school years and getting into summer mode, and this process is starting to come to a close. And so if you wanted to change up what you're grateful for or what some good news you have, either way is totally fine. Let's start at the bottom of the list today. Veronica, are you on yet? Tyler.
My good news is that Excel filed their transportation electrification plan to the PUC last week, which, if approved by the PUC, we would add 20 new programs to help offices, residents, and apartments to install more EV infrastructure, as well as help with companies with their EV pool car systems. And if the PUC approves, it would be over $100 million investment in electric vehicles and infrastructure here in Colorado. So that's my good news.
Awesome. That is some great news. Thank you, Tyler.
Yep.
Thomas?
I am thankful for my neighbors. During this time, we've just all gotten really close, and they're really the only in-person human interaction I get to have. So happy for them.
Aw, that's sweet. Sebastian?
Oh, let's see. I think my good news is that I've been getting a lot of sleep lately. No, it's pretty simple.
Nice. I have not been, so I'm very jealous. Sam? Where'd you go, Sam?
My good news is I'm thankful for all the extra family time. I think I maybe shared this with this group before, but a lot of mornings I was gone before the kids were awake, and they were ready for bed when I got home. And working from home and getting the extra time in the mornings and evenings has been amazing.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Sam. Rhiannon? Stop playing tennis for just a second. Or poker.
My good news is that I am going camping in Uray this weekend for the long weekend. Bought some gas cans and filled them up and put them in the back of my truck so I don't have to stop, and it's gonna be great fun.
Ooh, very nice. Pete?
Yeah, I am just grateful to live in Colorado right now. I have some relatives in the East Coast and other colder places of the country, and it's so nice to be in the middle of spring into summer with a great weekend coming forward and all the options we have here in Colorado. So I'm just feeling good about the state and the weather and the weekend and the whole deal.
Nice. Patty?
I wanted to say I'm grateful to Resilient Denver, but as well the city council folks that kind of moved this body into existence. And even though we're almost at the end, there's still a lot that could be done. So I'm just grateful that the ball is rolling.
Thank you.
But got to start somewhere, right? Naomi?
I am thankful and grateful to be taking the day off tomorrow and having family come into town. So looking forward to spending some time with my family and enjoying the good weather we're having here.
Very nice. What are you guys going to do?
Probably buy a bunch of plants. I've been really into plants because I've been home so much. So I think that and some other like home projects.
Nice. Michaela?
I think I said my good news already. Today's my birthday, so the fact that I made another year around the sun is pretty exciting. That is my good news.
Happy birthday. Where are you going out to lunch?
We went to Del Frisco's, so picked it up and now headed to the park.
Very nice. Beautiful
Social
day.
distancing, doing it in a good way.
Is Lori on?
I am here.
Hey, Lori.
Hello. Happy Thursday, everybody.
Thursday.
You have to use your imagination, pretend I have a really wild hat on right now. Picture a Jamaican woman with a fruit basket on top of her head. That's what you're going to visualize. That's what I got for you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to work virtually as a realtor and seeing the industry change and how it's made it a more inclusive environment as a result of it.
Kelly?
I am grateful for time with my kids and being done with school for the summer and being able to take the summer off because there was just a lot on my plate. And so, yeah.
That's wonderful. Kathy?
I am grateful that when the stay-at-home orders happened and we all started working from home, I'm a list person, so I always have daily to-do lists, and I started having the very first item on my to-do list to be to tell someone that I love them and why. And I've found that my family members and my friends are now more open and sharing about why we're in each other's lives and why we care about each other and what we love about each other. So for that outcome from the pandemic, I am grateful.
Oh, that's wonderful. John.
I am thankful for all of our public school teachers. Today, my second grader just graduated, and in about a half an hour, I'm going to go to my iPhone and go out to my street, and they're doing a teacher appreciation parade right in front of my house, so all the teachers can come by, and are going to all of the kids' houses and throwing out candy to celebrate the last day of school. So they have been heroes through this last couple months, trying to keep kids on task and keeping them learning, and just an amazing work from our teachers.
I agree. I have a second grader that is graduating today too, so I'm feel you there. Jessica.
I am under contract in a new house, which is exciting. And our house went on the market today. And it's like this fun yet terrifying anxiety to put a house. I haven't sold a house before, but we have more than a dozen showings already scheduled. So elating to think like, okay, it's going to be fine.
I think you and Emily can probably relate to that, huh? Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm just really grateful to have all this time with my daughter, who did her virtual graduation, riding around on the top of a car, getting greeted by all the teachers. And it's just been really precious to have this time before she heads off to college.
Awesome. Jasmine.
I am grateful for my neighbors who started Rock Garden. It's a take one and leave one. So I picked this one up and I'm happy to paint a rock after this.
That's cool. Jackie. I saw you.
So the good news is I'm wearing a hat. I don't know why. I saw everyone wearing it and I yelled to my husband, "Throw me a hat!" Sorry, I missed the memo, but I got a Puerto Rico hat from when he was helping out during the earthquakes in Puerto Rico with FEMA.
There was no memo. It was a little bit of a last minute thing. So, but look what happened. It just brings a little joy to everybody's lives.
And it's my junior's last day, so I'll have a senior in the house. So we're hoping she goes back to school in the fall.
We all are hoping they go back to school in the fall. Frank.
Boy, I'm slow on the unmuting. I'm grateful that 16th Avenue is still a shared street. It really is a great way for us to be able to social distance and actually see people face to face as opposed to just boxes on the screen here. And I can't let it go by to that, also grateful that after 27 years of, working on climate issues, that maybe, fingers crossed, something will actually happen, out of this process. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Thanks, Frank. Eugene, can you talk with us or chat out a thankful?
Can you hear me?
There you are. Hey.
Yeah, I'm thankful that after 2 days of technical issues, I dumped my old microphone and audio driver and finally got one uploaded today. So yep, happy about that.
Nice. Technology works. It's amazing. Yeah. Emily.
Hey folks, I've got some good news kind of sliding into something what I'm grateful for. So as of today, I'm 21 weeks pregnant, so about halfway there to baby arriving. And you all would be pretty obvious if we were all hanging out in person at this point. But I think that, it has really made the ability to participate in this process just extra special because I'm thinking a lot about the work that we're doing and the way that, we're creating a better, more livable city and world for future generations. And I'm thinking about, you know, what Denver's going to look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and that I'm helping to create some of that with so many folks in the community that, you know, hopefully my kiddo will be able to enjoy, and just crazy thinking about how maybe different the world will look and, you know, better in so many ways in the next 10, 20, and 30 years. So that's what I'm grateful for, is the opportunity to help, you know, do what we're doing and, you know, build a better city together.
Wonderful. Oh, made me cry. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow, Dominique. So good luck with that one.
Yeah, I have a 1-year-old, so I'm not going to quite have another one too soon, but you are lucky. It's going to be wonderful. So congratulations, Emily. I am grateful for family, family being close. And this is actually going to sound weird, but this morning we were talking about, I've had, between my husband and I, we had 3 grandparents die last year, but all were wonderful deaths where they were ready and expected and at home with families. And one of them in particular, just really glad she's not in the retirement community anymore. You know, I think that sometimes timing is something you look back on, and, you know, we're all just really grateful that we're not worried about them and all of the things that are happening right now. Obviously for people who have loved ones in nursing homes and other communities, it's really hard. So anyway, I've been grateful for being able to have had that passed already, and I'm not too worried about the people who are left. So anyway, and I'm grateful for you all. So thank you.
Thanks, Dominique. Brandon.
Hello. So I don't have too much. I'm just grateful that I'm going to be able to go camping after this meeting and just kind of get away and just enjoy it and unwind.
Nice. Veronica, I saw you join.
Yes. So I'm grateful that today my daughter also had like a parade, and I also do the food today, so I was able to figure out the schedule so I could be here and enjoy a hamburger.
Oh.
Hi.
Wave, Edison.
Grace, do you have some good news you're grateful for?
Well, I'll just say, like Michaela said, it's not my birthday, but it is my husband's birthday. So trying to come out of the room and pay attention to him once in a while.
Just a little bit. Sonrisa?
Hey y'all, I'm grateful I can be on this call today for as long as I can. But no, I'm really grateful for all of the service providers that have been here at the shelter. They're really like some of the most beautiful people I've met, and I'm really grateful that one, to get to know them and to get to work with alongside them. And so yeah, it definitely give some appreciation to any essential worker or service worker that you meet. They're doing really great work for very little pay, and we count on them.
Thanks, Vanessa. Liz, that is an amazing hat.
It's my go-to pirate hat for Halloween. I'm a pirate for Halloween every year because it's the best costume I've ever had, and so I just repeat it all the time. My daughter steals this hat from me all the time and wants to wear it, which is why it was so conveniently located when I was like, oh no, a hat. It's in her room. So I'm grateful for my very hardworking and handy husband who has been fixing all the things around the house, our evaporative cooler, our sprinkler system. He built a planter box. I can't even list all the projects that he's done since he was laid off on Friday. So he's Mr. Handyman around the house, and I'm pretty grateful for that.
That's wonderful. Jacob.
Yeah. Thank you all. I think, Patty, thank you for the addition of people adding what they're grateful for. And I have to say, this process, when I first looked at the scope of work as advertised, and I thought 6 months to get this done. This is a year to an 18-month process. And it's because of your dedication that I think, will be done in June with what we need to be. Obviously, there will be more work to do, right, Frank? But but with a really significant piece, high impact work happening here. And so I'm just grateful for your continued dedication. It's been amazing to be a part of. So thank you.
Wonderful. And I am thankful. So my son, on top of being developmentally delayed, has a heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And yesterday was his annual cardio appointment at Children's Hospital. So that was a whole experience. But his cardiomyopathy has not increased at all since last year, and his heart function is totally normal. So the doctors continue to just be on an every year annual checkup, but it is always a scary visit every year. And so, but I am super excited. Oh, and so that was mine. I'm sorry, Mike, I forgot you. You can go next, please.
Good. I'm glad to hear that your son's doing better, but I wanted to share, I'm super excited. I got this incredible Mo Willem shirt. It's like a heart with a face mask for supporting all the folks that are at the front lines, saving lives. And so I'm super jazzed about it. Plus, I have read so many Piggy and Gerald's, but it's nice to have my own t-shirt. I feel like I earned this.
You did. That's great. Well, thank you, everyone. And yes, thank you, Patty, for adding that, what we're grateful for today. That was wonderful. Okay, we are a little behind, but I feel like we're really connected today. And so I love that. So let's talk about what we're going to do. We are in our second revenue conversation. So we are going to dive right in to the revenue package. I believe Jacob sent out some pre-read ahead of time. So really looking at the phases 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to dive in, give you an overview of all 3 phases. Then we're going to dive into phase 1, hopefully come to some agreement on those recommendations, and then look at phases 2 and 3, and then close us out at 4 o'clock. So yeah, it's not going to be a super jazzy meeting. So maybe the hats will help, but it is heady and needed. So I think with that, Jacob, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Great. Yes, so this is really where the rubber meets the road. I'm hoping at the end of this meeting, we at least have full agreement on a revenue package for how to move forward. So before we launch in, let's remind ourselves what our consensus rules are. So of course, we want to seek full enthusiastic support. However, the will not block counts as consensus, and we have a consensus -1 rule, and we can agree to move into a vote if we need it. So for those of you who are early on the homework, that's great. There have been a few changes to the document, even as late as this morning, as people have started commenting and the like. So I'm going to share my screen and we will dive right into that document. For whatever reason, every time I share my screen, I have to open all the windows because, you know, I have too much open. So hold on just a moment while I get to the right one. Sorry about that. Here we are. Okay. So just to orient you on the document, let me hide the bar as much as I can there. Can everybody see this okay? So we're not going to spend too much time talking about how much money is needed. Regardless, even if we took out the 121 million needed for infrastructure, that leaves over 70 million still needed, even with reducing some of these other pieces like marketing and behavior training, and behavior change, training and educational programs. We broke down, I should say Group 14 broke down business versus individual incentives, since that's come up. Again, this is really just to give a sense of the order of magnitude of funds that could be needed. And some thoughts in there about infrastructure could maybe be funded through some other mechanisms like public-private partnership, stimulus money, or bond initiatives. And then no need to be shy about it. We've laid out 3 options for phase 1 revenue package. The sales tax, which we've been discussing, as I'm sure you're all aware, If you're surprised not to see the energy tax on here, we move that into phase 2, given the deep disagreement around how that should be structured in the near term. And then there's a parking meter increase. Each one of these has a description. We crafted, or I should say, I will take the full blame of crafting these recommendations for better or worse, just to have something for you to react to. It is based off of a lot of what we're seeing, examples that city staff have provided, and some revenue potential in there. So we have that sales tax that I mentioned, vehicle efficiency fee. This is the one that's probably changed the most for those of you who read early versions. We have a third example that's really targeted around miles per gallon. So there's a conversation we need to have here around equity versus revenue generation versus behavior change, and get some feedback from the task force on that. Then the parking meter fee increase, some interesting conversation there around dynamic, and certainly transportation has been looking at this for their own budget as well. So need to think through that a little bit. Then the phase 2 revenue options. These are ones that are really should be considered, but need some additional work. So the retailer tax or business income tax, for instance, is that Portland model that some people have been mentioning. There's some language in here that if phase 1 options fail, then we might need to look at phase 2 to fund phase 1. Then we have the energy use tax, as we've discussed it, the occupational privilege tax, which I believe Liz and Grace talked a little bit about last time, and then some fee options. So we have in here pay as you throw, which has come up a number of times, paying for trash and allowing compost to be free along with recycling. That could be initiated in phase 1, but it'll take a couple years before it starts generating money. So it's living in phase 2. Development impact fees. And then phase 3 includes the Excel energy franchise tax, with language in there that if an energy tax isn't initiated, then to consider that in the 2026 range. Congestion pricing, which needs a lot of infrastructure and investment to do that. And then I'm recalling there was a conversation that I had with Resilient Denver about maybe moving up one of these, but we have constrained by Tabor, require state action like gas tax and ride hailing fee, and then constrained by federal requirements. I think we'll hear from Resilient Denver an interest in moving this up to phase 3 for further consideration. So let me look at the chats. Marisol, anything in the chats that we need to address first? Doesn't look like it. So first, any questions about this? Does it make sense to put these in phase 1, 2, and 3 packages? Any broad comments or clarification questions?
Will the recommendation go to city council to have, I don't know, further task force to kind of hash out some of these bigger policy pieces, like the business tax and the other ones?
Liz, do you want to answer that? Liz or Grace? You're on mute, Liz.
Sorry. I might defer to Grace on this one. My understanding is that the recommendations report package will be presented to the mayor and city council, and that our office would help to coordinate the various recommendations across the city. So if there are things that require administrative or executive action, we would help to follow through on those pieces. And then city council would decide about following up on any pieces that require legislative action. Of course, we can also advance bills as an office. So there may be policy components that we want to advance and that we would bring forward to council through the mayor.
Grace, did you have anything?
I don't have anything to add. I think Liz got it right.
Great. Looks like John has his hand up.
Curious with moving the energy tax to phase 2, how is that going to tie in the current ballot initiative from Resilient Denver that will be going forward, obviously in phase 1? And I'm just curious how we're going to handle that.
So maybe Brandon or Thomas can talk about your thoughts in terms of when and if you would suspend the ballot initiative.
To keep it simple, when we see something else on the ballot.
John, does that answer your question? So,
yeah, I mean, I guess I want to be careful not to punt it to phase 2 too quickly, I guess, given, I think that the disagreement or the controversy maybe can be continued to be debated or try to find some common ground, because just pushing it off, I don't think solves it. And I also think that if the ballot issue is going forward anyway, we should be continuing to debate how we want to recommend going forward with that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, if we don't see something going on the ballot and we're continuing with our ballot initiative, we are very open to, rewriting it a bit with the suggestions of what the task force has been discussing. That again would need city councils to be able to do that, though.
So when we get to the phase 1 package, we can talk about this more in depth. Suffice to say, Resilient Denver may be willing to remove their ballot initiative if council approves the recommendations that the task force has laid out, assuming that there's a strong recommendation. Naomi, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you take it down?
It went away on my screen, so it's good to know my hand was raised. I put it in the chat. I'd like to know if we can add additional funding options, and I specifically called out the off-street parking for phase 2. It's something as the subgroup around transportation has met, we've talked about in terms of better understanding if there is an ability for the city of Denver to either do a tax or a fee on parking garages or any type of off-street parking.
Yeah, absolutely. When we get to that, we can talk about if there's anything missing. Thank you. Any other broad thoughts? I want to leave as much time as possible to make sure we get agreement around phase 1 to start.
Just quickly, as a general principle, I just demand that we leave everything on the table that is practical or possible, whether it be now in phase 1 or even in the distant future that may need further consideration.
So you can help us think through if there's specific aspects missing as we get there, okay?
Got it.
All right, shall we dive in to phase 1?
Yep.
So as written, based off of our discussions, we have on here a potential recommendation around a 0.25% sales tax. I think we've had quite a bit of discussion about sales tax. I do have from Zachary out of Jolin's office a little slide back from 2017 that summarizes, sorry, let me share this different screen, that summarizes some of the cost burden to Denverites and those outside of Denver. So let me see if I can pull that PDF up. Where did it go? This must be it. It's this one. Can you see that? 0.25%. So these numbers have changed a little bit based off of the recommendations. Pre-COVID, it was looking more like 45 million. And you can see the annual cost estimate at that point was $35, and that 24% of the revenue is attributed to resident spending I know we've talked about it broadens the tax base for people coming into the city and spending money, whether on vacation or from elsewhere in Colorado. So that helps frame the issue a little bit. I didn't see, go ahead, Brandon. I see your hand is raised. Brandon, let us know if you want to talk right now. It looks like you're either on mute.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt. Sorry. I just wanted to point out that the annual household cost is actually more than what we were talking about with the energy tax. I don't know if that requires further discussion or not.
I thought it was less.
Is it?
Closer to 100 a year or something like that.
It's around $70 per year.
So 70.
I'm sorry, I was thinking monthly cost. I apologize. We did want to discuss raising this rate though, just to kind of get us to a higher number where we need. We saw, I know we're talking about 71, but it could be up to 190 million a year. So it is something that we'd like to discuss further as well.
Great. So let's get some clarity. I was hoping to get a slide with all the exemptions that are on the table, but unfortunately we don't have that exactly. I know that includes most recently the feminine hygiene products, as well as food and medical supplies. Liz or others on the phone, do you have a sense of the other exemptions? Because one of the considerations from the group is what the exemptions are and what they should be.
So I had previously in the revenue documents that was sent with the calculator tool last week, called out the specific exemptions in there from the Denver Revised Municipal Code. I don't know if you can pull that up on the screen, Jacob, but it did summarize food, medicine, medical supplies, feminine hygiene products. Obviously, government and nonprofits are also exempted from paying the sales tax, but there's a longer list in the Denver Revised Municipal Code that I provided a link to. It includes things we've talked about in other conversations as well. So we've talked about things like a gas tax. Well, the gas tax is at the state level. We think it would be preempted at the local level, and it's specifically exempted, like liquid motor fuels or something like that is the language that's exempted in the Denver Revised Municipal Code. So I don't know if you have a way to pull that up quickly, Jacob, but I did have a link to that code. Otherwise, I can find it in the
Yeah, sorry, I am
in the document that I had sent out previously.
Yeah,
in the sales
I'm
tax.
looking for it, and for some reason didn't come up.
Jacob, let me know. There's a couple of questions in the chat that probably should need to be addressed. So let me know when you're ready for that.
So I think Tyler's question is a big one. Maybe I can move to that, Liz, while you're looking for that. Is that okay?
Yep, I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat.
So phase 2 and 3 revenue options as they're currently written, although it's up to the task force, is that there should be, most of them, it just says that they should be further researched, further understood. It doesn't say that they should be, quote, moved forward under all circumstances, but we do know that based off of the budget, the revenue needs projections from Group 14, additional funding may be needed. So as we look at how to fund additional climate action, those are the pieces that we should pull from, not that they would necessarily move forward under all scenarios. I don't know if Tyler and Mike, that helps answer your question, but how that recommendation is worded is up to the task force, but that's how it's in there now.
Okay.
Tyler, did that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't know what my answer now is to the larger question of increasing sales tax, but that was very helpful. Thank you.
Right.
And then, Jacob, the other question then is Thomas brought up is how people want to have a conversation about increasing it from 0.25 to 0.5.
Can I just ask a question also in terms of the sales tax? Given COVID and the questionable amount of tourism, I mean, we're dealing with a projection on tourism based off of what? Because my concern is if tourism and visiting dollars does not increase at the rate that we anticipate, the issue that, for example, Thomas has been raising about increasing, I'm just trying to get an understanding of what are we looking at and the numbers that they're using as the basis of sales tax coming in from people outside of the city.
So I can speak to that. The slide that Jacob showed was from 2017. In the documents that we sent you all, we used 2018 numbers, I believe, perhaps 2019, I have to look. But these are obviously pre-COVID numbers in terms of the total sales tax revenue to the city. What we're seeing right now is, somewhere around a 15 to 20% reduction. Obviously, I think everyone is hopeful that that's short term. So maybe for the next 1.5 to 2 years, and then we would start to see those numbers go back up again. So if you looked at the estimate that we provided, it was, I think, 44.9 million, something in that range. So it's likely to be around 20% lower next year if the trend continues. I would need to check with the budget office to see if anything, more recent is available than what I heard, about a week and a half ago. But I would imagine that if the sales tax was something that you all decided that you want to move forward with, and it was something that would eventually appear this year on the ballot, and it was approved and made through all of those hurdles, and then it was implemented in 2021, it's very likely that the 2021 numbers would be about 20% lower. But hoping that in the future, obviously, as the economy rebounds, that those numbers, go back up again. And so you're not looking at sort of a permanent reduction in that revenue, but it would be temporary based on the economic conditions.
Right. Jessica has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I chatted some language here that happy to take any editing on that because I just pulled it up quickly. But I was thumbs down on the sales tax the past time that we talked, and I think one thing that would make me feel comfortable with this and be able to agree to it moving forward is putting language in our recommendation that essentially urges the city council and says that we as a task force strongly believe that the city council must put appropriate guardrails in place around equity. And to me, that means, ensuring that those in the communities in Denver who are most burdened by social injustices don't remain burdened by those with the sales tax. So that I think is noting which products are exempt from the sales tax, which we've had some conversation here about, but then also specificity about how the money could be spent, right? Prioritizing low-income communities for projects, that kind of thing. And I don't think that it's our job as the task force to have to write that language out and list it here. I'll leave that to the city council. But I think we need to acknowledge how important equity has been to us as a group. And I'm hoping that something along these lines can get us there.
Great. I did copy and paste that language for further consideration in the document, Jessica. Great. So I would say that we have a proposal on the table for moving it from 0.25 to 0.5. Thomas, you made that suggestion, so I'll call on you to explain it. I have a poll ready already for the 0.25 and the the 0.5 sales tax, expecting this. So Thomas, can you share your thoughts?
Well, one thought is, with the decreased revenue that we're expecting, that's a reason I see the need for an increased tax. I also want us to be better prepared in the money that we have coming in. We're looking at, we removed a lot of the things and it brought us down to 70 million, but I still think a lot of those pieces are extremely important for us to include. And I'd like to see us have the funding to be able to do that.
So we have a couple folks who've raised their hand. I'm assuming, Jessica, your hand is down now. So then Sam, oh no, that's
Mike.
Mike, sorry. Sam was clapping.
That was a long time ago. Do I need to take my clap down? I'm sorry.
I actually cannot take your clap down. I can take.
Okay, I'll fix that. But I'm clapping always.
All right, awesome. Go ahead, Mike.
I just need a democracy refresher. If we go from 0.25 to 0.5, is this a council vote or is this a all 600,000 Denverites vote?
It's a both. It's a both. So at this point, in order for something to make it onto the ballot, it would need to be referred by council to be on the ballot. And once referred by council, then everyone votes on it.
Can I just add one?
Oh,
go ahead, Mike.
I was just worried. Is anyone worried that a 0.5 will look too big versus a 0.25? That's my concern. I agree 100% with Thomas that we need the money up front. The sooner we make the investments, the sooner the benefits begin to multiply on themselves. But I would be so upset if we lost because we got greedy. I'll put greedy in quotes, but that is a concern of mine because 0.5 looks like a lot. 0.25 looks like a quarter and it's not a big deal.
So that was exactly what I was going to kind of address. My thought around that is that people just see a tax and they're either for a tax or not. They'll see that this is a climate related tax. We have strong support in the city of Denver to take climate action. There will be those that do their research and will say this is too much, but I think the average voter is just going to see it as a climate tax and see the necessity for it.
So any other people before we launch the poll? I think we have pretty strong cases for doing the 0.5, and I'd like to hear some people concerned about the 0.5 express themselves and maybe put it into context historically.
Before we go there, we have a caller that's not identified.
That's Grace. That's Grace.
Okay, Grace, you have called in. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Anybody who's concerned about a shift from 0.25 to 0.5 want to share their thoughts?
There are a few questions here and other numbers.
Just to summarize the conversation that's happening in the chat, a 0.25% sales tax increase is the highest increase that has ever passed in Denver. I am not familiar with whether or not a higher increase was proposed but did not pass, failed. So if others are familiar with a campaign that proposed something higher than 0.25 and it failed, please let us know. But I know that the highest sales tax increase that passed has been a 0.25% sales tax increase. And that was the exact amount of the parks tax that passed in 2018. That was also the amount of the Caring for Denver for mental health services that passed in 2018, and a couple other measures I think that passed that year. So they were all 0.25% sales tax increases.
Yeah.
I also I'm concerned about the passage at 0.5 just because it sounds very overwhelming. I don't know how much difference, but I don't know who it was, if it was Veronica or Naomi that raised the possibility of a 0.3. or a, 0.30, because we know that people passed 0.25 before for parks and whatnot, but I do think that it's pretty overwhelming, given the fact that a lot of people are really just literally counting their pennies right now.
Frank has his hand up.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, to the, when the question is, do we want more money? Do we need more money for the climate efforts? Absolutely, the number needs to be a lot higher, as far as I'm concerned. Then the question of like, how do we get there is the second part of that. And so increasing the sales tax, we're doubling the proposal from 0.25 to 0.5 would not be something that I would support, but I would be in support of other options, placing other options on the table. I do feel that we've got some gaps in how we're looking at things and how we're addressing land use either through policy or a funding mechanism is still a big gap in my mind.
Got it. So what I'd like to do then is call the question via poll. So let me go to my polls. I think I can launch it.
So Jacob, I have that there's actually three. So there's the 0.5, there's Sebastian has asked, he has made a recommendation 0.5 or 0.25 and let city council decide. And I might be mucking that one up a little bit. And then there's a 0.3 also on the table.
Right.
Okay.
So any thoughts about a 0.3? I think Patty was saying that the increase was perhaps nominal, and that we have a history of passing 0.25, if I'm summarizing that right. Any other thoughts about a 0.3?
I really like the Sebastian idea of offering, a range between 0.25 and 0.5, and that would allow city council to really do some polling on those numbers and kind of get a better idea.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear from. So what we've heard in the past from Jolyn is that we should be specific about what our ask is, especially given the time frame, and that if we're not specific, then it reduces the chance that council can come to agreement. I don't believe Jolyn is on the call.
I'm here.
You're here. Do you want to say anything to that, and then we'll move to Emily and Rhiannon?
Hey, Joel in here. Yeah, I mean, I'll stand by. I think the more specific, the easier it will be for city council to say this is what the task force said. I think that if you open a range, you are likely to get on the low end of that range. And so again, what I said before, and now I'm gonna forget the exact wording of the quote from the rock band, but in the absence of making a decision, you've made a decision. And I would tend to say that you're generally probably, if you give city council a range, especially with the kind of range that you're talking about, well, in 2018, 0.64% of total tax increase passed, the largest single item on the ballot's ever been 0.25. And if you're giving a range that starts at that highest level ever put it on the ballot in a single initiative and goes up, then you are likely to get near the lower end of that. So I do think that that is part of the decision. But I don't know that this council, this particular group of individuals has yet to refer something like this to the ballot. So I don't know that for sure.
Great. So any other thoughts about Sebastian's proposal for having a range?
I'll just speak to it really quickly. I think that sounds really rational, Joel, and I would really hate to see this thing not pass. Again, I'd rather have 0.25% than nothing at all. So while I think it is detrimental for us to recommend a range or not be definite about our decision, I think it is important for city council to employ their mechanisms to see if either would pass, and see if 0.5% would pass, and have that be their first priority, and then have the 0.25% be the fallback.
Yeah, if I can, I think I had my hand raised. Is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so, I think I echo some of the maybe concerns I heard from Sebastian, and, some of the things that I've heard from Frank about thinking, first of all, to Frank's point about some of the options beyond the ballot, because I would, like putting all of the eggs in a basket of whether something passes or fails on the ballot is a really scary proposition to me when we're talking about really ambitious policies we want to see move forward. But all of that said, I really am hearing Council President Clark about, if we give a range, we might end up on the low end, and I'd love to see the council do some research. And I think our prerogative as a climate task force is to really give the city council a strong mandate to act boldly. So I want us to ultimately be successful and get the funding that the city needs. But I also want to, make as strong of a recommendation as we possibly can.
Thank you, Emily. Rhiannon?
Since we're not allowed to, the charter prohibits us from increasing the gas tax. Can we also, in order to set up future funding or revenue streams, recommend that they put a charter amendment on there that strikes that line and would allow for future increases in the gas tax?
I don't know the answer to that. That would have to be in state statute, correct?
Oh, I thought you said it was in city charter. My apologies.
It's
the gas tax exemption is in the Denver Revised Municipal Code. If you go to that link I put in the chat, so it does specifically exempt motor fuels. But my understanding is that you would have to look at a statewide tax increase for two reasons. One, it's very likely that the state would claim preemption if you try to do a local tax that's already imposed by the state. And two, it might be less effective because people could go to another municipality just outside of Denver's borders to get their gas. And so there have been others that have looked at the gas tax, City of Boulder and others have done studies on that. And that was the conclusion that they came to, that there would be state preemption issues, number one, and number two, people could just drive just outside the boundaries and get gas elsewhere.
Rhiannon, you good? Okay, John?
My apologies. I'm sitting here at the teachers parade. So sorry about the background noise. I just wanted to say that I think without talking about the energy tax, my worry is that we're not really sure what we're trying to solve for. And if we don't have the funding sources to get to the dollars that we need, we're not really taking our goals seriously. And so I guess what I'm thinking is that we've got to fill this gap somehow. And if it means that we've got to raise this to 0.5, then that's what we have to do. But I think that if we look at the energy tax at the same time, maybe we can get comfortable with the 0.25.
Congratulations to everyone there. Jennifer.
I guess, I kind of feel like the energy tax for phase one is off the table. And so to me, following on Emily's point of that we're supposed to kind of come up with this bold proposition, it seems to me like this is the most important thing Denver's been asking for a long time. And we have a lot of really good solutions that could use this money. And this would be the time to ask for the largest sales tax increase. Especially because I do feel like there is going to be a rebound. This is a way to capture lots of other people participating in Denver's economy to participate in this. And I think what my question would be is if we propose the 5.5 and there's polling that's done, and then council really thinks that the 0.5 is too high, do they have the ability to then say the task force recommended this, but we're going to go with something we think is more reasonable to pass? I just don't know if that's an option.
Sure. So let me summarize the proposals that I think are on the table. I don't see any other hands raised. So first of all, we have the friendly goat amendment on the table that would be included in here unless people have any concerns for that. And that again reads, the task force strongly believes that the city council must put in place appropriate guardrails to ensure that the sales tax does not overly burden those in Denver most impacted by social injustices, including what products are exempt from the sales tax, and specificity about how the money will be spent in a way that will be most beneficial to these communities. Any concerns with that addition? Great. So all of these that we'll launch the poll on are for that. We have some people thinking that 0.25% is best. Some people that think 0.5 is best. Some people that think a range. And then the Gremmert amendment is 0.25 with the option to drop down if it looks like it won't pass. Is that about right, Jennifer?
0.5.
Oh, sorry,
Then,
0.5
yeah.
with the option to drop down to say 0.25 if polling indicates it is less likely to pass or something, or won't pass. Is that accurate? So any of the 0.5.
Jacob, I'm really sorry
Yeah, no, go ahead, Kathy.
Can I ask a question? And I don't know if Liz or who would know. We're talking about polling. Can the city do polling?
And I guess the question is polling within the time frame as well.
That would have to be done by outside funds. You are correct, Kathy.
This is Councilman Flynn. That's correct. The city could not engage in that. There would have to be a campaign committee or something doing that.
Got it. It's a good question. Jennifer, do you want to, knowing that, any thoughts?
I guess I'm in the point of going big. I think again, if we're gonna, I mean, this is the big ask for the big future, and I think we're in a place now of there clearly is a lot of need. I think we certainly want to see these other phase 2 and 3 solutions be proposed as well. But I think if we're going to do this, we need to go big. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Right. So given that, let's launch this poll and see where everybody sits so that we can see if we have agreement, okay? So we haven't done this before, so I'm launching the poll. You should all see it in front of you. Do you all see it? Nobody has responded yet.
Yeah, Jacob, I don't see it yet.
You don't? We're starting to get some people respond.
I have it. I'm just working through my responses.
If you scroll around, do you see something, Sam, that says poll?
No, but my company made us get rid of the app for security reasons. So I'm on the web-based system.
Hey, Sam, since
I was on a Zoom call earlier. You cannot poll if you're just using the browser.
Okay. If anybody would like to private message me, I can go in and I'll add yours because I'm not a voting member, but then I can include it in the poll.
Right.
Well, I can't even see the language poll.
Yeah, I'll send the poll language right now to you.
Okay.
Let me get to it.
And I just as a reminder, if you are not an official task force member, please do not vote. This is for task force members only.
Correct. Sam, I'm sending this to everyone, okay? It's a little long. Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll have to scroll down so you can see the last question. I had to do that too.
Okay, I see. I think we're done. Lori, did you get yours in?
Not done, not quite done yet. Give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry, Sam.
That's okay.
I did. I had to send it up through private because it wasn't accepting mine either. So I sent it to Marisol privately. Yep.
Yeah, Liz, I'm sending you Lori's votes. If you can vote for her. Jacob, I'm gonna, Sam, I got you, and Patty has one. So Jacob, I'm gonna send you one. So maybe you could vote one for Patty.
I'm not allowed to vote as host,
Oh, okay.
which is interesting. So if you could send it maybe to Alana.
Yep, we'll send to Alana. Okay. And Sam, I got yours.
Mike, thanks for your Googling to know that the web browser doesn't do this. That's helpful.
Like I said, I was on a webinar to figure out how to best use this because we just bought not the meetings, but whatever this platform, a webinar platform, and
yeah,
they were strong against browser only.
Sam, I didn't have an answer to question 4.
Okay, I think I probably just didn't scroll down far enough as I was instructed to do.
Okay. And then Liz, can you confirm that you were able to vote for Lori?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
And you have confirmation from Alana, Marisol?
And Alana, yep. Last one. And if I'm doing my math right, that looks like 26 votes.
Yeah.
So we should be good.
We should be good. All right, so I'm going to end polling and show everybody. So here we are. The 0.25 sales tax has 15 people enthusiastically supporting it and 12 indicating that they will not block it. The 0.5 sales tax has 9 people with enthusiastic support and 10 people will not block, but it has 8 cannot live with it. The 0.3 sales tax, 12 enthusiastic support, 14 will not block. We do have 1 cannot live with it. And then the range, we have 9 enthusiastic support, 13 will not block, and 5 can't live with it. So per our rules, number 1 and 3 could pass. I think that we owe it to the person who cannot live with the 0.3 and perhaps some of those that will not block it to explain their reasoning to see if we can maybe work on that. And if not, we do have consensus around the 0.25% sales tax. So that's where we're at. Jennifer, you look disappointed, I know. I'm sure others were really hoping for the 0.5, but
I'm
there's
fine. Consensus
strong,
is good.
strong support, or strong 8 people, which is, you know, about a third of the task force can't live with it. So, how about this 0.3? Anybody want to share their can't live with it thoughts?
Yeah, I was the sole objector. I objected to it because I don't think we should be passing a small number like that hasn't, that specific number hasn't passed in the past. I mean, 0.25% has been the standard historical number. And I just don't think the 0.05% that we'd be gaining is relevant enough to turn our backs on a historically successful number.
Other thoughts about that? So what do you think? I think if I was looking at this, I see 56%, the majority have enthusiastic support for the 0.25% sales tax, which is a majority, and then we don't have anybody who can't live with it. It seems like we have agreement.
Frank has a question.
Frank.
Excuse me, more of a comment that, you know, 56 to 44 is, you know, is probably not the kind of the large consensus that we were hoping for. Still is, you know, consensus according to our rules, but it's 56 to 44.
Well, 44% won't block, but nobody said they can't live with it. So
right.
But it's still not as many. Yeah.
But there's not, you know, somebody could choose enthusiastically. They chose not to say enthusiastically. And so there's not a tremendous amount of enthusiasm there.
Yeah. True. That said, it does look like we have consensus with the majority and enthusiastic support. I know it doesn't always feel this way in these meetings, but this is a big win. A decision has been made. Sebastian, thank you for, you know, giving us some fist pumps. You didn't get to do that in your graduation, so let's see some more of those.
Will do.
So we're going to move forward, okay? Unless there's any last words of wisdom on this. All right, so the next piece on here, moving back, I'm going to share my screen again, is, wherever that went. Oh, it's because it's on the polling. Is the vehicle efficiency fee. So let's go there. Look at that, one down. So the vehicle efficiency fee, there's a lot of ways to structure a vehicle efficiency fee. Some ways that really prioritize equity, or revenue, or behavior change. And so the first question is, does the task force agree that a vehicle efficiency fee should be part of the phase 1 funding package? And then secondly, as this is being designed, since we haven't had any conversations with Department of Motor Vehicles to really understand how this should be, some ways in which that could be structured, and then whether or not zero emission vehicles should be included. Jessica, do you have your hand raised?
I do, yeah. Jacob, you had mentioned that this had changed since the draft that you had sent around. Can you elaborate on those changes? I'm sorry to.
Yeah, so the primary change is adding this example 3, which I would say is more of a, not that we have lots of examples, but more of a traditional way that folks have thought about a vehicle efficiency fee, which is really linked to miles per gallon. So it's meant to drive behavior so that you'd have a sliding scale for the least efficient vehicles paying more than the most efficient vehicles. So that's the way that Boulder looked at it. It was by vehicle type. And then for passenger vehicles, they had this sliding scale. They ultimately chose not to do it as a city. They had the added difficulty of needing to partner with both the county and the state, since Denver is both a county and a city. That's one administrative hurdle that may be easier. And then the need to add low-income exemptions, targeted exemptions, however that be considered. It's not exactly clear how that would be instituted, but exemptions are in there. So that one really targets behavior change. And then I added this note in blue here explaining the 3 examples and what we're hoping to get from the task force in terms of how to weigh these. Does that make sense, Jessica? Other questions or clarification questions first, I guess? Was there another hand raised? I thought I saw one, but then it went away.
Yeah, this is Peep.
Go ahead, Pete.
So I have a recommendation. This is a really complicated topic, and there are a host of different ways to get at this, and we could quite easily spend the rest of our meeting just on this. And so 2 of the options, for example, are sort of the inverse. So I would recommend that we make that decision about whether or not to move forward with the concept of a vehicle fee with the principles that we care about, and that happened in phase 1, and allow Grace Rink and her team to move forward on how to do that with those equity considerations. I don't think we can create the program today, and
Agreed.
I would try to avoid that discussion entirely.
Yep. I just, if there are some thoughts about how to think about equity, behavior change, and revenue that the task force has as guidance during the creation of this, that'd be helpful. Do you agree with that, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to give them some parameters. So we want to be sure that there's a way to either exempt low-income populations or create the program based on those considerations. And ideally, we want to link this to polluting behaviors.
So there's a little bit in the chat. It looks like. Any other comments or clarifications here that are needed?
I could probably answer a couple of the comments in the chat. So
Great.
There was a question about what is the specific ownership tax. The specific ownership tax is the state tax. It's basically your vehicle registration fee that you pay, but it's really actually the specific ownership tax. And it is based on the vehicle value. So that's where, if you apply the fee as a percentage of that tax, that's how the equity piece could be considered potentially, because you're assuming this, it may not actually be true, but you're assuming that people with lower incomes have older vehicles with lower vehicle value. People who are buying new vehicles could afford a higher fee. So that's what that example is. And then I've also seen a proposal that was part of the Boulder study that was done on the same type of mechanism, where they also said, because somebody said it doesn't actually incentivize less driving, which could be true. It just incentivizes you to get a more fuel efficient vehicle. You could also present your, and unfortunately the database that captures this from the state doesn't really have this information, but they were looking at some option where you could present proof that you drive, say, 2,000 miles or less per year for that vehicle, and then you would pay a lower fee or no fee. So administratively more complex, but you're getting more at the reducing VMT and driving component of everything.
So go ahead.
Liz, that's super helpful. I think one thing, just recognizing what Peep said about this task force not necessarily needing to design out this entire program today, but instead like making some recommendations for the city council to like have this option on the table, recognizing that it's complex and takes a lot more sort of planning and consideration for today. I'd hate for us to take an option for generating some revenue that's that's not tied to the ballot off the table for consideration. And, you know, I just want to reiterate my point about we should be making bold recommendations to the council on everything they should be considering.
Great. So maybe what we can do here is, anybody have any concerns about including a vehicle efficiency fee as an option or as a recommendation for phase 1 funding? Feel free to raise your hand. Pete?
So I wonder if we could just express that more strongly, not a recommendation, but we would like to see a vehicle efficiency fee implemented in phase 1.
Great. So be implemented in phase 1. Does that help? This part, Pete? The task force recommends a vehicle efficiency fee be implemented in phase 1. Great. Jessica, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I would also note, I think that the language needs to be better than formulated in an equitable manner. I didn't get a chance to think about what that could be, but I think we've got some ideas, including below, but we have some other ideas on our team about what that could look like. So would love to continue to have that conversation.
Yeah, so maybe we can take each of these in turn, starting with equity. What are some ways in the design of this the task force would recommend the city be thinking about when it comes to equity related to the vehicle efficiency? Jessica, you want to start?
Yes, noting that this is not my area of expertise, and I think the city's got a lot of experts on this as well. But some ideas are, and I think this is for city council and city staff to end up deciding here, but you could have a fee like this only at commercial vehicles, right? You could do it just with the second vehicle of the same owner. You could cut off a set of the oldest vehicles, right? Like vehicles over 20 years old are exempt folks on social aid programs like SNAP. So again, I don't think we have to debate the specifics here, but I think that there are some, I would love ideas to be recommended to the city council and the city staff and encourage them to come up with their own ideas as well.
Great. So Pete, is your hand still raised? Okay, so I'm lowering your hand. Dominique?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we want to make the burden on opting out and exemptions as low as possible for low-income people. So what we really want to disincentivize is people who are buying new vehicles already from buying not fuel-efficient vehicles. And so I think if we can try and really target it towards that rather than worrying about people who have older vehicles because they may or may not be able to afford to update those, that will make it a lot kind of simpler. And then there might be other ways to disincentivize driving that we can think about, but we really want to just focus on people who are buying new vehicles and making those more fuel efficient.
Yeah, I found it fascinating that the average Colorado vehicle, I don't have Denver numbers, is over 10 years old.
Well, and there's also a lot of embedded energy concerns. And so you don't really necessarily want people buying new vehicles all the time. So there's this whole other kind of, thoughts about that. So I just think we want to really make it simple.
Any other equity considerations? Yeah, Veronica?
I'm just thinking about, again, equity, the people who
you know, don't, you know, I'm thinking kind of like the immigrant population that, you know, they are buying those used trucks to do basically more of a labor type of job, and they need those vehicles, you know, that aren't necessarily fuel efficient, but it's what's going to help them pay their bills, and they're going to be the ones getting hit on this.
You mean
You know,
only commercial vehicles? Is that
well,
right?
it's not. It's like their. It could be like their like small their personal business. So it could be, but it could also just be like, I need this truck so I could put all my big tools in it, and I need a vehicle that I could buy for about $2,000, even though it's a gas guzzler. But does that make sense? I'm thinking about those type of, you know, like how are we going to be, and you know, that could be their second vehicle, because maybe or maybe it is a primary vehicle, depending. I'm just trying to think like how many of those people that I do, you know, I do know, you know, people that have those guzzlers because it gets the work done.
Got it. We have Eugene, Frank, and Rhiannon. Thank you, Veronica.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jacob, I think for the community I serve, I think as I kind of shared with you offline earlier, like just awareness around what behavior change we're trying to drive is going to be really crucial in regards to African-American community and electric vehicles. The efficiency fee, it's like kind of, so that it isn't seen just as a penalty because I don't, you know, I'm not shifting to this technology or to this opportunity to better our environment. So I think awareness is going to be really huge. I don't know if we're able to build that into this. I mean, obviously not, probably not, but I think somewhere along the way, that the attraction, the community I serve, this awareness about what the projected outcome is going to be crucial.
Mm-hmm. Frank, thank you, Eugene. Frank?
Excuse me, yeah. Yeah, I think I want to just kind of follow up on Veronica's point. You know, if I'm, you know, buying a vehicle, my choices are the vehicles within a particular price range that I can afford. And so it could be the case that the vehicles in my price range are not very fuel efficient, and our fuel efficiency standards overall, you know, in the country are not anywhere near as high as they should be. So my point here is that we're, you know, there's behavior on the individual's part that we do want to, you know, influence and reward for doing things that are helpful to the climate. But at the same time, we've got a much more of a constrained path of options, whereas is there an incentive or to the automobile manufacturers that the city of Denver can create in order to increase the fleet numbers of vehicles available for sale, and through increased volume manufacturing, those prices can go down and therefore open up the create greater ability for people to afford more fuel efficient vehicles.
Frank, just to respond to your question, is there an ability for the city to do that specifically? I don't think so. I think that the low emission and zero emission vehicle standard that the state of Colorado just recently passed is what's going to drive the availability of more models in Colorado and ultimately drive down the cost of those vehicles. So I don't know that there's anything that the city specifically could do, but that state policy should help, and we should start seeing some of those changes in the market soon.
I read an article, I don't know, Liz, what you think of it, but it said cost parity should be reached by 2027. I don't know how accurate that is, but it was interesting. Rhiannon.
Yeah, I just also wanted to thank Veronica for her comment. One of the challenges that our local unions in the building and construction trades area see is that low road contractors misclassify their employees and force them to get their own LLC, which would then potentially put their own personal vehicle in that commercial range. And I'm wondering if a way to avoid like that group of folks who are already, facing additional hurdles or being misclassified on their job is that we tax commercial fleet vehicles. So if you have more than one like commercial vehicle, then it's taxed, that type of thing. And I'm wondering if that could also potentially encourage like car rental companies to have a greater stock of high efficiency, low emission vehicles as well.
There would be essentially the way that you're thinking about it, Rhiannon, is companies who have a fleet of vehicles would be incentivized if there were higher fees for commercial fleet vehicles and say common passenger vehicles.
Correct.
To have more efficient or zero. That's really interesting. Going back to Veronica, does that address your concern?
Yeah, I mean, it does to a certain extent. I think, this I think is something I'm thinking it would need to be kind of phased and to truly end up being equitable because, I saw what Sonrisa wrote was, sometimes it is just like a financing thing. They probably would get a nicer vehicle if they had the ability, like that financing, chance to do so. And so, looking long term, like what are certain programs we could put in place to incentivize people to exchange vehicles for something that could compete with what they have
Yeah,
to
I've
get their
added
work done.
some of that language in here from Sebastian, who raises up a good point of a transportation recommendation around buyback programs, including not just for zero emission vehicles, but also potentially micromobility options or public transportation passes.
I was just going to say, I think that when we had that first equity training, one of the examples that was shared was the example of having arrangements made with certain entities so that the buyback program could be incentivized and really made known. But all of the points that people have been making is when you're talking about the population group that may be, buying whatever they can afford because they can put money together to get a $2,000 truck, I think it's still going to be a problem because these are folks that aren't utilizing banks and banking institutions and have their own kind of family or collective, resources that they're pulling together. And we should really, part of this package would be really trying to reach out to some of those minority and, entities so that there can be an effective incentive and buyback that goes across the board for folks.
And are you saying a lower fee for lower value vehicles, and then on the back end, you have policies and incentives in place to?
Well, policies and incentives is a whole program in terms of involving private entities so that they're really, we can't do it through government entities alone and banking institutions because it really is recognizing that people are going to whatever is culturally aligned and feels safe that they can get resources together. And so we really do, this as a formulation has to be with involving those various chambers and what are their mechanisms that people are going to be pulling resources from, because it isn't going to be big banks.
And sorry, and kind of what Patty was saying, you know, I kind of think about, it's also just a mentality, like, yes, this truck is old and I'm going to get another vehicle, but someone could still use it. So it's not like, let's just throw this, like, the mentality that we could fix it and we could still use it. So I think if someone knows that their truck is going to, you know, get recycled and it's not just going to end up, how do I say, I'm just trying to think of like how many people I know, like I'm keeping this old truck just for parts for my other truck type of thing. So that mentality that we're not just trashing everything away. So yeah, I saw like trash for clunkers or cash for clunkers, but some people are like, hey, I could pass this on to my cousin over here who needs a vehicle and I have some parts for, you know, so that truck keeps going and going and going. It doesn't come off the street.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on the equity side that people want?
Mike has had his hand raised for quite a
Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
I totally forgot what I was going to say. Something about trucks.
Thank you, Mike, for that beautiful contribution. How about in terms of behavior change, in terms of how this fee should drive behavior change? Yes, it should be structured in a way that drives behavior change. I can only see Patty, Veronica, and Mike. We have 2 yeses and 1 no. Dominique?
Well, just want to be clear that there's 2 behavior changes. So one is buying more fuel efficient vehicles, but the other one is less driving. So I don't know how we put that in here, but the second one might be more important than the first one.
So this goes back to the sort of the first thing I said. I don't think we're going to solve this one today. There are 2 diametrically different ways to get at this. So one is, you know, reduce the pollution by going after the older vehicles, and the other one is tax people on buying sort of the new cars because that's where the funds are based on value. So we can continue to hash this out, or I think we can say we want a solution that fits these parameters and hand it over a little bit with the idea that low-income populations can't feel an undue burden.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the caveat around equity, that, I mean, it's broad, but it's specific in that the users that we don't want to be hurt because of whatever is determined around a vehicle efficiency fee. And hopefully creating revenue that will help, in, to Dominique's point, disincentivize driving through investments and other aspects that will get people out of their cars, whether it be transit, biking, and other forms of multimodal transportation.
Mike, did you want to say anything about your opinion, since I saw your head going side to side?
I mean, just from a solar company's perspective, we are all about more fuel efficient vehicles. Driving less, we don't have an opportunity. I mean, we can't tell people to move closer to our warehouse. So this, you know, would punish my solar installers for behavior they have to do. There is no change that they can do. So I have real concern around the driving less, but certainly the more fuel efficient vehicles, down with that.
Okay. So.
I'm raising this because Sebastian had asked that his recommendations in terms of pushing EV subsidies for low-income buyers or buyback program.
What did he ask? I put that in here.
Okay.
So,
Frank,
Frank, go ahead. Thank you, Marisol.
Yeah, Thanks. I was just going to say maybe the nexus between Dominique and what Pete and Naomi were saying is is transit-oriented development, right? I mean, like people can drive less if they don't need their particular vehicle. So taking into account what Mike was also just saying too, is that you need a vehicle, you know, an installer needs a vehicle. A cab driver needs a vehicle, you know, and they need that. And so in those cases, you know, we're not necessarily, you know, talking about that, but what we're talking about is the ability for people who could take transit and don't need the vehicles to be able to have that freedom of mobility in order to you know, take advantage of it. So developing, you know, our land in a manner that allows for people to more easily access high frequency transit is going to be the way for us to incentivize less driving by individuals, more driving by bus drivers, and, you know, less vehicles on the road, more green spaces in our community, you know, and less climate gases.
So here's where I think we're at, and then we'll call the question. So the recommendation is that the task force recommends a vehicle efficiency fee to be implemented in phase 1 with equity considerations where low-income individuals do not feel undue burden either in cost or administratively, and where they're, you know, make it simple. That's a big part of the message here, with other considerations about how to have commercial fleet vehicles, pay a higher fee, invest in those options, Frank, that you were just talking about, so that there are incentives to buy other options, including for transportation passes. And in the behavior change, the incentives should be structured in such a way so it leads to incentivizing people buying more efficient or zero emission vehicles, but on the backside, that there are incentives that are supported by revenue that allow for people to have those options that Frank, you were talking about, for less driving. So with that, I'm not going to launch a poll again for this, but I would like to see, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Anybody not in favor of that option, please vocalize it now.
I'm sorry, but we need to see it written out, I think.
All right.
In the chat. There's lots of us who are struggling to keep all the words together.
Yeah, it's hard to do all the words at the same time. So, and then Thomas has a question around specific, how much revenue are we trying to earn here? I'm afraid we just don't know enough as to how much revenue this would bring us. So let me try to chat something. It's going to take a second. While I do that, I'm wondering, Marisol, can you talk to people about the parking?
Sure. Sorry, I did not have that pulled up. Hold on.
You want me to send you the link? Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, you're gonna need to send me the link. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Sec. Done.
Okay.
And chat. Everyone. Here's the link. And then I'll work on some recommendation language to come back to.
Caught me off guard there. All right, here we go.
All right.
It's okay. Okay. All right, everyone, I'm getting there. Give me a second. Sorry. Efficiency fee. Almost there. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, everyone. So the parking meter fee So currently, as you all know, Denver charges a flat fee of $1 per hour. And so what the question here is, Jacob and Liz, please chime in. I know Alana, there were some emails about this back and forth. There is already a recommendation, is my understanding, to go to $2 an hour, but that first dollar would be for what, Jacob?
This is Liz. I would suggest maybe Alana can walk us through this.
That'd be great. Thank you. Since she's been really involved in that. Thanks. Alana, would you like to walk us through this?
Yeah, I guess first, so the city mostly sees managing meters as a way to manage the curb. So that's a important piece of the right of way and enables us to have control over our public access. So you think about transit also needs the curb, scooters and bike parking. There's a lot of delivery. There's a lot of different uses. So managing the curb first and foremost by meters should be a way to manage our assets. So I think that's important to keep in mind throughout. And this has had a lot of discussion in the transportation department, actively looking at the best way to manage this as a resource. So there has been modeling done for what it would look like to increase the price of the meter. Right now it's $1 across the board per hour at all of the meters in the city. So we've done modeling on what that would look like if it went up to $2. A conservative estimate would be $8 million a year. And that's what's been looked at. There is a need to reinvest money in managing the program. And I guess the other thing I'll add is that right now all the parking meter revenue goes into the general fund. So if there was an interest from the task force in directing it into something specific, that would need to be figured out as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On that last point about the parking meter fees going into the general fund and maybe needing to figure out something specific if this would be going into a specific fund, would that be something that might entail requiring this to go to the voters by some means, or would it be something that city council could assess?
I don't think it needs to go to the voters. I think the city internally could set up that fund.
Great.
Other questions, concerns with this recommendation?
Before we get too deep, here's some draft hastily worded language for people in the chat.
So I think that the other thing that I had made in some comments here is that it might be worth considering whether this is based off of demand or a flat fee across the board. And I think that we don't quite know what the fee should be because, as I mentioned, primarily the goal should be to manage the asset. So I hesitate a bit about like setting a flat fee. We'd want to know what's effective, and that might vary on different areas. So the city right now doesn't do that, but other cities certainly do change metered pricing based on how busy that area is or time of day or specific areas in particular. So another thing to consider.
So before we launch into discussing the parking meter fee increase, let's see if we have agreement. The language can be improved upon, but generally conceptually, does this capture the task force's recommendation?
Do you want to do another poll, Jacob?
Sure. Let's move it into a poll. I was going to ask the question in reverse, but do people like the poll? Seemed like that worked pretty well. So I guess keep discussing that while I see if I can make a different poll here.
Thomas did say, I think we need to recommend a dollar goal. Thomas, did you want to make a recommendation on changing some of this language before we do a poll?
I worry that by not setting a specific revenue goal that we don't get where we need to be. And I'll just say that in regards to where we're looking at in money in general, just the sales tax also, you know, with the 20% less, we're looking at about $36 million that would come in. So it's lower than when we were looking. If we don't set dollar goals here, I think we hurt ourselves.
Do you have a suggestion for a dollar goal?
I mean, I saw the number that it projected between 10 and $30 million could come in. I definitely want it higher than 10. I mean,
no, it was for the parking meter, it was 8. So sorry, I'm getting confused. Yes, between 10 and 30, based off of how it's structured. Yeah, sorry, in my own head.
Okay.
I think this is one of the biggest behavior change pieces that we need to see. So I would suggest that we go after 30 million.
Thoughts about that?
There's probably a little bit of a challenge on that, right? Because one of the goals for two of the goals are to raise money, like you're saying, Thomas, and the other one is to shift our transportation methods away from single occupancy vehicles. So if we're successful in shifting away from using single occupancy vehicles, then the demand for parking goes down, and so then like the revenue starts to go lower. So the point about kind of figuring out what that study is and diminishing returns is probably helpful. Because if we're wildly successful, right, then there's there's much fewer cars on the road paying for parking, and then that revenue stream is just going to go down.
We could make it a phase 1 goal. I mean, phase 1 is a relatively short period of time. It's unlikely we'll massively turn over the auto fleet then.
So
I think the other issue with setting a revenue goal is that for a fee, you have to do a study of what are the impacts you're trying to mitigate from the fee and how the fee will be spent. Otherwise, it becomes a tax that has to be voted on. So I think that it can be challenging.
I think for parking meters, it's just in Dottie's control, and I don't know that it needs to be voted on. Just for parking meters, that would be different from like the vehicle emission.
Yeah, I was referring, yeah, thank you, Alana. Yeah, I was thinking specifically of the vehicle efficiency fee.
Pete, and yes, everybody, sorry, we had started the conversation about the parking meters, but we have gone back to this language about the vehicle because we do want to take a vote on that. I do have, okay, so John, did you have something you want to ask about the vehicle efficiency fee?
No, I'm sorry, it's about the parking meter. I'll lower my hand.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Kelly, did you have something on the vehicle?
No, mine's parking meter too, sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So let's focus on this. I think the question is at hand is, do we need to have a revenue goal for this or not? Liz is suggesting that might get us into murky waters from a legal issue. So is there anything that we want to say about revenue generation? That won't get us into those murky waters and maybe isn't a specific amount.
Can I just put an understanding, the vehicle registration and the efficiency use, what proportion of that is under the city and what proportion of that is under the state?
So this would be a Denver fee. That would be Denver specific. That would add on to the registration fees that you already pay, including the state amount. So it wouldn't affect what the state is collecting from vehicle registration. Does that answer your question, Patty?
Jacob, so when we see the poll right now, I don't know if you know this, but it's the old poll results. So we don't see a new poll right now.
Yeah, I haven't launched. I mean, I am about to launch the new poll, but I haven't yet until we get agreement on the language.
Great.
So right now, to get to so I think that one thing that we can do is say the task, and let me just send this via chat. The task force recommends a vehicle efficiency fee to be implemented in phase 1 to address emissions from transportation. Sorry for the typo. It should be structured in such a way that it does not cause undue burden either in cost or administratively. It should also be structured to incentivize purchasing highly efficient or zero emission vehicles. The fee could support incentives and policies to improve public transportation, micromobility, and buyback of low efficiency vehicles. Any suggestions to the language? I do see Thomas worry about the revenue. But any other suggestions to the language beyond grammatical, but content-wise, and then we'll ask the question.
So Enrisa asked, does micromobility equal multimodalism?
We could change that if it needs to be more specific. The task force has used micromobility in some of the other recommendations. Maybe somebody else like Peep or Naomi can answer that question.
I think it's fine. I mean, multimodal is the broad description for transit, biking and walking and other things that are not a single occupancy vehicle. And micromobility encompasses like bikes. So we've said public transportation, bikes, walking and other things. I don't know that it matters. You could, I mean, if you want to cover your bets, you could say improve multimodal. I actually like it as it's written.
Right. So aside from whether or not this complete package meets the need, I would suggest with the addition, thank you, Sonrisa, undue burden, it doesn't specify who we're talking about. So undue burden to low income individuals and households. So let's see if I can launch the poll. I see that I've created poll 2. There we are. So let's see where we're at on this.
Again, if anybody has a problem, please chat me and I'll make sure your votes get counted.
And to Thomas, I think that there just needs to be more analysis to see how much this will raise. We don't have that number right now.
So Marcel, am I sending you my vote via private message to the vehicle efficiency fee?
Yes, if you'll do that, that'd be great.
And it's just a yes or no, or?
Enthusiastic support will not block or can't live with for those having difficulty.
Okay.
Jacob, my only point is that they're going to have to do a lot of analysis regardless, aren't they? So it would seem to me in setting a dollar goal, they're just they would see through their analysis, this is how we get there.
But are we looking for a total package? Like, I think the total package has to be X, right? And we're saying, here are some ways, it's a sales tax, parking meter, and vehicle efficiency. And I think we got one other thing. In total, that all needs to be this number, not the individual silos. Because as someone pointed out, if we drive more efficiently or we get more multimodal, our parking meter fees will go down. So I think we just want to say it has to be this whole thing rather than individually each of the things. But I'm with you. Somebody mentioned that, I think maybe you said this, we're not taking our goals seriously enough if we're not going to resource them. And so that's true. We've got to hold the council accountable to say this is what we think needs to get done and needs to get funded.
I'm in agreement with that. I mean, if we're putting a full number out there for this, that we're recommending that the city council needs to go after, then that makes sense for me here.
We have 20 people who have participated in the poll. Marisol, you're getting props for your latest hat change.
Feel like we got a Viking through this last 30 minutes, guys, so gearing up. 21. Is everybody voted that's gonna, or is anybody not voted? I think we should go ahead and close the poll, Jacob.
Sounds good. So sharing results here, we have consensus. A little bit better, Frank. 76% enthusiastic support. Anything, so normally I would ask, how can we get folks who will not block to enthusiastic support? But I think given where we're at, we have consensus. Congratulations, second consensus of the day. This is huge. So, tens of millions of dollars toward addressing climate change being recommended by the task force is something to be excited about. So we have the last piece of phase 1 that I would love to get through. So let's move to parking meters.
And a few of you did have your hands up. So if you want to re-raise your hands now for the parking meter discussion. Pete.
Hi, yeah, so I would just like to put forward that I think this is one of the most important things that we could recommend in phase 1 right now. And I'll lay out why. I know it's not popular, but if anybody remembers when Hickenlooper was running for mayor and he did that sort of parking meter ad, the standoff of the parking meter made, it'll give you some idea of how long it's been since Denver's taken a look at what the parking meter rates are, which is over 20 years. And we are, I'll make a little bit of a joke here, but sort of in a 1950s state with the technology related to the parking meters. And to me, that's really the crux of the issue. So the focus that I think we need to bring to this is that Dottie needs to actually invest in smart meters. Without it, they really have their hands tied and they don't have an ability to, I think Alana used the term manage the resource, but basically to react and be flexible and begin to build the programming they need to deal with the different stresses on downtown in different areas at different times. So to me, that is a critical need, and it also will drive behavior change. And that is the reason to move this forward. So it doesn't bring in as much money as some of the other areas. But with the addition of smart meters and some of the funds would go back to pay for the administration of this program and the meters themselves, then they can begin to look at where does it make sense to raise these fees based on congestion issues, and where doesn't it make sense, and be much more nimble and responsive and sort of adaptable based on what we need to do to manage increasing congestion everywhere in the city. So I think that's the chief argument for moving this one forward. I think a second argument might be that right now the single occupancy vehicle looks really, really sexy because it provides for social distancing. So people's behaviors are going to change, and they're going to set and reset in the next year period while we're dealing with COVID. And it will be much harder to look at incrementally beginning to raise parking fees in different areas later if people have already decided, oh, this is the only way to get there, and our downtown becomes really flooded with cars because parking's still cheap. So for those two reasons, I really encourage everybody to consider this parking fee very seriously. And I think it can be done incrementally. I don't think it has to be a flat $1 to $2 or $2 to $3. I think we can start the program with a certain amount of money, implement the smart meters, and then that can help Dottie make smart decisions about where to right size parking and where not to. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. John.
I agree with Pete. I think that they've got to come hand in hand. I will just convey that I was at the Lodo District board meeting last night, and there were a lot of concerns from business owners about raising the meters. So I wanted to convey that to everybody, that there is concern that a lot of these small business owners in Lodo are already struggling with this economic downturn. And so to increase meters, there was a lot of concern around that. For me personally, I feel like that this achieves multiple things. It does increase revenues, and it also disincentivizes driving. So I think that there are multiple reasons to look at this. But I think if there were smart meters like Pete had suggested, then the city and Dottie has the ability to kind of think through how and when to raise rates, and can also consider small business owners and different impacts that this might have and react quickly. So I think that by doing both, you're getting the incentive, you're getting the revenues that we're looking for, but that you're also recognizing that this could be very difficult for certain property owners or certain business owners, and the city can adjust.
Great. Thanks, John. Kelly.
Yeah, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to second on that point that was just brought up, is if you're increasing the sales tax for people going to spend money downtown, also campus, like the college campuses, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I get the point, and what we're trying to do is encourage people to not drive and to take public transit or the light rail and those kinds of things. But from a college student's perspective, parking is already almost unbearable as far as going to classes and such. And so that's my only issue as far as like raising fees for parking meters is the 3 campuses right there.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that Kelly raises. One of the things that I have heard from Pete, and I think maybe John mentioned it too, was the deployment of smart meters and being able to figure out the parts of the city where parking needed to be right sized, or if there would be different rates at different times of the day. So that might be something to factor into the smart meter program once it was deployed.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in on this part of the conversation?
I'm just thinking about like kind of like what Sonrisa wrote about, equity and the college student and all of that. And, and then also what John wrote, like in other US cities, parking is so much higher. At the end of the day, if I'm driving into downtown, I'm, and I have a limited amount of income, I'm going to try to make the best decision. If I'm going with 4 people, 5 people, am I going by myself? So, at the end of the day, if I end up deciding I'm going to drive and I'm willing to pay that extra, $4 or $5, it benefits our cause. And if I decide to take the light rail in, it still benefits our cause. So, yeah, parking can't be free and that would be just way too hard to make it for free to those who really need it to be free. Yeah.
Thanks, Veronica. Brandon.
Did we talk about parking garages at all? Is there a way to get money out of them as well with this?
I think that's been proposed for phase 2 to add to that.
Okay.
I'm not married to phase 2, so I don't know if we need to get through this one and then talk about that as well as phase 1. I think given what we've been discussing, that could be something for phase 1. So I'm just wanting to throw that out there and more in terms of putting that on the table as a possible source, because we don't even know what the capacity is to have a fee or a tax, to Brandon's point on off-street parking.
Great. Let's focus on the parking meters right now, and then we will definitely look at the others that we could potentially add to phase 1. Does that work?
So right now I have an addition in some places like our college and university campus. Considerations for the impact of those who frequent the area should be taken into account.
And Sam, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just a practical consideration from a revenue raising standpoint. We're sort of evaluating our back to work program. And, I've seen a number of frightening statistics on sort of the post-COVID impacts here. I'm questioning whether not the merit of it, but the practical realities of how many businesses are going to be open downtown in the next, we'll call it 12 months to, I can't, I don't want to put an end date on it, but I don't think the traffic's going to be there where there's parking meters. And I think raising the rate now potentially disincentivizes those businesses to even come back, which could have kind of a cyclical result where businesses aren't coming back downtown, people aren't parking at meters, so the rate at meters doesn't generate the revenue we actually want.
Good thoughts. So let's,
I'm sorry, just, it's not directly to, what Sam was just saying. I'll just, another point here is that people who are, so if you drive downtown and go see a movie at the pavilions and you park in the garage right there, and then at the end of the movie, you get your ticket validated and you just had free parking. But if I bicycle to the pavilions to see a movie or take public transit, I'm not getting a similar incentive. So there's some equity issues around that. I don't mean me personally, I don't care, but that's an example of we're incentivizing the wrong thing.
Just so I'm not, oh, sorry, Jacob.
No, Sunrisa just said all the meters are free downtown right now, and that would probably extend during the initial period of recovery. Sounds like free until June.
Yeah, and I guess the question really to turn my statement into sort of something that could be action oriented is there a way to sort of pay for or deliver the dynamic metering that can do this pricing without raising the meter fees? Like, could we get dynamic or smart meters installed sooner rather than later so that, we can balance sort of the demand shock impacts and slowly increase them as it's appropriate? I guess, do they have to be linked, or is there a potential for other revenue resources to get this infrastructure in so that we can go from free to $1 or free to $1.50 or free to $3, whatever it may be?
If I can just add to that, so they don't have to be linked. So there is a lot that the city can do right now in terms of raising the price without new meters, and vice versa. You could get the new meters without raising the price. However, the meters cost money. So they would need to be funded, and you would have to go get the money approved and then go out to bid. And so it would be a process. So I wouldn't think that option would be in the near term.
Alana, in ballpark it, not going to hold you to this, but what is a meter cost kind of at scale? Have you guys priced that out?
It's been priced. I don't have the number in front of me, but I can try to get that.
Okay.
So unless there's other comments, perhaps we should call the question but I just wanted to clarify something. As worded, we have initially start with a meter increase. And Alana, I'm looking to you. Do you think that the wording should be solely focused on dynamic pricing, which is what I changed it to, based off of what I thought people were saying, or have a meter increase to pay for that and then switch to dynamic pricing? Just want to make sure I have the wording clear for people to vote on.
It sounds like from the discussion that there is support for raising the rates and that it would be nice to ultimately have more flexibility to manage the system through dynamic pricing. But I think, does that help? That's what it sounded like people were supporting. I don't think it means, it didn't sound like people needed to have the dynamic pricing. And I mean, I guess that's more of a policy recommendation than a revenue generation.
Okay. So here's the wording as I have it. The task force recommends incrementally increasing parking meter rates over the next 3 years for existing meters up to $3 based on demand, and ultimately invest in meters that allow for dynamic pricing and fund stronger meter enforcement and staffing with the goal of raising $8 million for climate action and $8 million for transportation needs. In some places like our college and university campuses, considerations for the impact of those who frequent the area should be taken into account. The city should also explore the addition of new areas with meters to support funding phase 2. Okay, so.
Jacob, excuse me, Pete here.
Yeah.
I'm confused between the 8 million and 8 million. Is this 16 million or 8 million?
Well, so there's existing, it's a total of 16 million. There's existing, and Alana, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Dottie has been looking at the parking meter increase as a way to fund some transportation needs. And I didn't want the task force to get in the middle of that. So then there's an additional 8 million. Yes.
There was analysis that was done that looked at if the parking meters were priced to keep up with inflation, that would be around $2. So if the city moved to do that, that it would conservatively generate 8 million. There are a lot of people who have thought about this idea and have been vying for that money. So, and it has been thought that that would be going towards transportation with the nexus if that were to happen. But anything, all of this is theoretical. So I think putting forward the recommendation for what you want is your recommendation.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think the conversation that we've been having broadly, especially around solutions, is all encompassing of a variety of kinds of solutions and actions that have a positive benefit for climate. Obviously, everything in the transportation space does. And so I don't want anyone to assume that we or this process is solely driven to be looking at just the climate office. So, you know, in my view, those funds that might support any kind of transportation action, whatever the source of those funds are, is as much a climate benefit as something that might support, you know, actions for buildings or, you know, electricity, you know, renewables. So, you know, I think just to clarify, you know, fees have to be tied to what is the purpose of the fee and what impacts are you trying to offset from the fee. Alana, you know, clarify that's not necessarily the case for parking meters, but in general, that's the case. And so if there are fees related to transportation, it would need to be focused on transportation or other sectors on other sectors. So I think that we're looking at solutions comprehensively, we're looking at revenue comprehensively. And I think that some of this revenue might support work in other agencies. And we want to just make sure that we're being thoughtful and mindful of all of our colleagues across the city that are doing work in various areas. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that's, you know, the purpose of this is not to sort of redirect revenue to only a particular part of city government, but really looking at the totality of what we can do on climate across city government and the totality of the potential solutions as well as revenue sources.
So it sounds like you're saying that you'd rather not have the specificity of where the money goes?
I think it's probably more appropriate that the transportation related revenue sources are directed to transportation related solutions.
So I would agree with that recommendation. I think it's a perfect fit, if I could put that forward.
So then
One way to handle it might be to just suggest that the transportation solutions are multimodal and would also meet our climate goals, which
yes,
I'm confident that they would, but you could specify that.
So maybe we can
Right.
just say with the goal of raising 16 million for transportation related climate action. Is that simple enough? Okay, so there's the new language. I'm launching polling.
Okay, and I have some votes. Kathy had to leave, so I'm gonna, Alana, I'm gonna text you a vote, and Liz, I'm gonna text you Sam's. Katrina, Jasmine is having an issue. Are you on? I'm gonna send you one.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
Let me know when that's done. I think that's the last one.
Okay.
Coming in.
All done.
Great. We have agreement. So here's where we're at. Congratulations. You have 3 funding recommendations to support phase 1. That does not mean that everything is fully done here, of course. So I think that, first of all, we need to acknowledge that this is a huge leap forward, even though there are concerns on the table whether or not this is enough to fund it. And so what we can do is Marisol and I will put together a form for further consideration from the Climate Task Force. The things that we have on the table are the phase 2 and 3 recommendations. We will add in there into phase 1 parking lots and see if there's support for parking lots. And then in addition, we'll move up to see if we have support for the toll into phase 3 on Pena Boulevard for further consideration and research. And then I feel like I'm missing one other thing. Oh, and then we'll see whether we have more support for energy tax in phase 1 or phase 2. So with that, any other final additions to the polling that we'll do after this meeting to round out our conversation?
Since we're adding in the parking structures, which sounds like a good idea, what about residential parking permits? I'm not sure, you know, maybe Alana, you know, but I don't think that there's a fee associated with them, and that could also be a revenue generator.
We don't have a fee for residential parking permits.
Would people like to add that for consideration in one of the following phases or phase 1? Okay, is there a suggestion for which phase that should be put in for voting? 1 by Peep, 1, okay. 1 by Tyler, okay. So we'll put 2 additional options for phase 1 funding and send that out in the poll. Awesome. Okay, Marisol?
John has a question.
John.
I was just going to suggest that I don't know how we would do it necessarily, but some form of a running poll of what our funding gap is, because we're making these decisions. We're starting to add to the funding source, but like top of head, I don't know how much we're short. And I think that'd be really helpful for us to constantly kind of know what we're missing.
Yeah, Mike. Good idea, John.
Very similar idea. Thomas and I were chatting, I think, in some of the hubbub between parking meters and things about having a total number that we know we need to achieve, whether that's a running total like John just suggested, or just make sure that phase one says these options generate X. And if they don't, then the council needs to find more options. So it's a similar idea.
Great. We'll work on that. Okay, in the last 4 minutes. So you all have received a bunch of calendar invites from us. So one of the things, because of the way we had to switch this virtually, Jacob and I talked a little bit about how do the different groups get to see what the other groups are recommending and give each other feedback, something that was definitely missing when we switched to virtual on the solutions. And so each group, except John, I'm going to hunt you down. Each group has established 1 hour of office hours, either tomorrow, Tuesday, or Wednesday, recognizing that Monday is a holiday. So here's what's going to happen. Either Jacob and I and the lead is going to sit, we're going to sit in the Zoom room, and anytime in that hour, if you want to join the Zoom room and ask a question, give some feedback, happy to, there's not, you don't have to join for the whole hour. So, but this is your chance to give the other groups feedback so that we know during our next meeting, we'll obviously need to spend some more time on the revenue, but we also want to get group buy-in on the entire, on the solutions that are being proposed for every different area. So if you have major concerns that, gosh, at that 1 hour, I'm really interested in that, I do need to give that group feedback, I cannot at any time during that hour that's been established give that group feedback, please reach out to me and we'll find a direct way for you to cross-pollinate. Okay, so I just wanted you to know what all those invites that went out were. Yes, Patty.
I just wanted to raise, because Sebastian had to leave, that he sent out something for the C&D waste diversion and wanted to encourage people because he had several recommendations in his write-up that should be taken up by that subgroup or at least reviewed before the next whenever that meeting is happening.
Okay, I think that would, Jasmine. We'll make sure that Jasmine takes a look at that. Okay.
And I don't think I got that. So if you can forward it to me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And we're meeting, waste and consumption is meeting tomorrow, just FYI, from 10 to 11.
Okay. I also just wanted to raise for the last meeting, which is like, I think in
June,
that we've talked about a lot of this, which I think is great in terms of what's going forward to the city council, but I'm a little bit worried that we're not thinking smart about what work we have yet to do before that ending in terms of the PR, getting, rolling out some kind of public education campaign, because I think there's such an immense amount of work that has to be done in terms of public opinion. And I would hate to see that because we really are going to be going against the tide in terms of the effects of COVID on the population, putting forward these things where it's like one more thing. And if we don't spend any time talking about that, I'm a little bit worried that we're just passing the buck, because as everyone knows, the buck does not stop anywhere. And there's so much public opinion making that has yet to be done. And I I apologize because I'm speaking from being in very much the heart of communities that are being impacted hard by COVID and have all of these gut reactions. And it's, there's so much, like education and employing people who are public opinion makers that I'm concerned that we don't have any discussion about that.
Good point.
I would like to just quickly respond, if that's okay, Jacob. I know we're over time, or we're right at time, but.
I was going to ask if you would be able to.
Sure. So our office really recognizes the importance of climate communications and educating and reaching out to the public. Obviously, I think there's a big difference around what we can do or can't do around a campaign. We cannot obviously campaign for anything that would be on the ballot that you all might recommend and that City Council may or may not take action on. But in terms of the importance of the work, the goals, the solutions, the strategies, the progress we've made, those are things that we think are very important, and we would like to continue to expand on the communications capacity of our office to do that work. We have talked with Marisol and Jacob about on the next agenda, having a discussion with you all about how your report will be released and what you would like to do to raise awareness of the recommendations in your report, including things like having an op-ed that is co-authored by task force members, maybe a virtual press conference, whatever you all think you would like to do. We would like to have that discussion in a future meeting. And then, as I said, we can't really, as a city, do anything on the campaign side. So I think it would be up to folks here, if you are supportive of things moving forward, to do that work outside of this process. And then finally, to Frank's point about the accountability and how we will move forward. We do have the Sustainability Advisory Council that is the formal advisory body to our office. And I know that maybe Grace would like to say a few words about this, but we've been looking at, how else we can continue to incorporate new perspectives and engagement from you all and from others in our work, so that we have a strong, community-wide input into the work that we do across a wide group of stakeholders. So that's really important to us, and that's something that we're absolutely going to work on as an office.
Grace, do you have any last words of wisdom for the group?
No, I didn't want to take up more time, just to say that I echo what Liz just said.
Please, everyone, fill out your survey. I know some of you have already left. I'll email it out also, but the link is in there. It's literally 3 questions. It helps us shape every agenda. So please, please, please take 2 minutes to do it for us.
Thank you all for your hard work today. We made some big decisions. And thank you to Marisol's hats.
And have a wonderful holiday weekend. Everybody take some time off and rejuvenate. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz and Marisol and Grace, I'm going to stay on the line if we want to do a quick debrief.
Sure.
Hey, Jacob, can you end the Facebook Live?
Yes, please.